Much obliged to have you join us, as always, on the program TMI. Beautiful Monday morning. Well, let's get our conversations on course as we look at the nagging question that surrounds the Niger Delta, a region with so much resources, but it's really not telling on the lives of the ordinary man, ordinary woman, boy, girl, children in that region. What with the fact that the region is blighted by environmental pollution due to activities, specifically exploratory and exploitative activities by multinational companies in the region. There's a new narrative to it as to agitations and engagements to ensure that all of these are reduced to the barest minimum. But whether we like it or not, there is no week, no day, no month the Niger Delta is not in the news, particularly against the background of some of the happenings in the region. I mean, I just read this morning some artisanal refineries that were destroyed, apparently to stem the ugly tide of sabotage, as they will want us to believe. But we need to move beyond that and see what we can do to open up the oil and gas space so we can have more funding, more investments, and change the narratives. Reverend Golo is the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, and of course is our guest here on the show today to look at some of these conversations and what can be done to change the narratives and stop the pollution in the region, hold those responsible for the pollution accountable. Until and unless we do that, all of these ugly trends will continue. Reverend David Ogolo, many thanks for joining us on the program.
Very much, Mr. Sonny.
Okay, let's get started by having an overview of the issues that have continued to blight the region since oil was first discovered in Oloibiri several years ago. Those same issues are still there. What's your take on why all of these issues have persisted over these years, despite the millions and billions of dollars coming from the region?
I think you said it all. Over 6 decades now, oil was discovered in the region. Rather than this oil becoming a blessing, it has become a curse. It's not that there is no blessings in the oil discovery. It's just that the human beings and the multinational company have refused to allow the oil to be a blessing for the people. You have seen now that the oil has become a source of division, underdevelopment, loss of livelihood in the Delta. And you've seen struggles from Adakaburu, Ken Saruwiwa, and others. They have lost their life, all in an attempt to amplify the voices of the people whose livelihood have been completely destroyed by oil and gas investment. So what we've been doing is that is continue to amplify this voice, continue to put these issues on the global agenda, and say you cannot continue to exploit people's wealth and the people don't benefit from it. The worsening part of it all is that the political elite from this region have taken advantage of this to continue to advance their narrow interest. And even those agitators, they've continued to marginalize the interests of the people. So we're looking for a better way to communicate these concerns to different stakeholders around the world. And I'm happy that just last week here, the World Council of Church Executive Committee meetings in Abuja, in their resolutions, also again gave voice to the people of Niger Delta and call on investors who in the last few years or decade, they've not been seen to be behind or complicit in this problem. Investors that people who don't even know, you will be shocked to understand that the Church of England, they were also one of the investors in Shell. Until we raised this campaign to the Church of England, we wrote a letter to the Archbishop of Canterbury. We were happy that in June this year, the Church of England divested away from Shell because they were frustrated in their engagement, meaningful outcome in the engagement with Shell. Shell continue to undermine all possibility to ensure that the people of Niger Delta have a benefit of their livelihood. They frustrated all court processes. they use their resources and power to continue to misinform and misrepresent information around the world. And it will interest you that in our last month visit to Norway, we also raised these issues with Norwegian Oil Fund. Norwegian Oil Fund is the third largest investor in Shell. So over 10 years ago, we raised questions about the credibility of Shell to actually meaningfully engage the people of the Niger Delta. And in our campaign, we raised these issues with the oil fund. And rather than the oil fund taking very meaningfully what we were saying, the Minister of Finance in Norway did advise the oil fund to continue to engage. And that after 10 years, let's see whether there will be improvement. Fortunately, Shell continued to use the Ogoni cleanup. Ogoni is less than 1% of the Niger Delta. We're talking about a region that is totally in a deep mess. But because of just little investment of less than $2 billion that Shell and the Nigerian government and UNEP are engaged in cleanup in Ogoni land, that is now being used as a kind of a cleanup in the region, which is not true. Ogoni is just less than 1% of Niger Delta. Just recently, the Bayelsa Commission released a report, a very damaging report, and that if Bayelsa alone should be cleaned up.
Yeah, a bit of a technical glitch there. Reverend David Ogolo, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, giving us some perspectives on the challenges in the Niger Delta, particularly as it relates to oil pollution, environmental pollution that has continued to blight the region and make the people in the region to live in poverty, in penury, and in squalor. And how all of that will pan out in the days to come, only time will tell. But we hope to be able to re-establish connection with Reverend David Ogolo again so we can conclude this conversation, particularly against the background of efforts geared towards encouraging companies, individuals, organizations to divest their investment from some of these multinational oil companies. And so for environmentalists, activists, their effort is now geared towards attacking the root cause of the problem. If the multinational oil companies, who are the major polluters, are not willing to do things right in line with international best practice, the best way to deal with the issue is to go after their sponsors. And if their sponsors are being convinced to see things from a different perspective, that will really call them to order. One thing is very clear is the fact that some of the practices that are coming into place in some parts of the world, like Nigeria, when you compare it to what happens in other climes, they are completely different, completely different. So we've got Reverend David Ogolo back with us now. Reverend Ogolo, just continue. We had a temporary glitch there. Yeah. Yes, Reverend Ogolo, just go ahead. Looks like you got back and probably brought the glitch back again. Well, let's hope we can re-establish connection with you so we can continue with this conversation. As I was saying, that when you look at the practice in Nigeria by some of these multinational oil companies, and you compare it to what they do elsewhere, they are miles apart. They are years apart. There is no way there is any correlation. So which means they tend to operate with different templates, different standards. All right, in US, in UK, in the Arab world where you have large chunks of oil deposits, you look at the process of oil, how it has changed the lives of the people there, how it has affected the lives of the people. You can say the same for Nigeria. In fact, interestingly, in some of the areas where these multinationals are located, they have major investments there. You can see that in the areas where they occupy, they can have 24 hours power supply. But the local environment that is the owners of the land they hardly get power supply. So that seems to be why this agitation has been on for such a long time. And it just seems to me that it's not going to end anytime soon until and unless we do the right thing. But another twist to the conversation rests on the fact that even the local operators or players in the industry, are they doing any better in terms of working with these best practices to ensure that the people of the region continue to enjoy that process? So let's get you back, Reverend David Ogolo. You were saying some things as it relates to the fact that efforts are being made now to have some of these major investors in these multinational companies divest their investment. But my question is, to what extent will that help to reduce the challenge of oil pollution in the region? Okay, I barely hear you. You need to unmute your audio icon. You need to unmute your audio icon. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry for that.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So the investors are very important. They are the ones who have invested in this multinational oil company. Like I said earlier on, the Church of England, who also invested in Shell, they've also tried to engage Shell to ensure that Shell implement best practice in terms of their operations. If you look at the oil spill that have damaged the environment in the Niger Delta, Shell cannot claim ignorance, even though they try to criminalize the activities of the community people. I don't say completely that the communities are not involved. Some of the individuals are not involved in oil pilfering, but the large scale with which oil is stolen from the Niger Delta cannot be carried out by poor people of the Niger Delta. It's an organized crime which Shell cannot claim ignorance, which the federal government cannot claim ignorance. The large-scale nature of oil theft in the Niger Delta, big organized crime carried out by government officials who claim to be security. Why this has not been stopped with technology available? It will tell you that there's complicity from high level. Okay. And as a result of the oil spill flowing from this, the whole biodiversity has been completely damaged. What the people depend on for sustenance have been completely damaged. So what we are saying is that whereas those in this company are huge profit every quarter, people of the Niger Delta that have the wealth, that have this asset, women and children are dying. And so we felt that oil company must take responsibility. They cannot continue, these investors cannot continue to be going back to their banks with declaring huge profits, whereas the people that owns the asset are dying every day.
Okay, we lost that connection again with Reverend David Ogolo. It's been a topsy-turvy in the last couple of minutes getting to sustain this conversation. Well, some of the technicalities that you experience having this kind
recording
of
in progress
conversation, as it were.
We want the investors to necessarily, but a situation where the company is not willing to put in place an operation that reflects best standard, and also at the same time help to address the oil spill that have damaged the whole entire environment option. Okay. Particularly when on national institutions we're supposed to be using to hold this company accountable have now been compromised, try to resort to legal processes to hold these companies accountable. But the companies, because of their weight and power, and you know how the judicial system has become in Nigeria. So we're looking for more creative and innovative way to hold this company accountable. And we felt that the investors, they are soft target for us. We will reach out to them. We will ask them to engage these companies to carry out a clean operations in the Niger Delta. for them to invest in restoring and remediating the environment.
Okay.
But if you insist, and like what has happened in the case of the oil, the Norwegian oil fund, in 10 years engagement with Shell, and they have seen that there hasn't been any meaningful result from this engagement, there will be no other option than to ask this oil company to these investors to pull out, because the company cannot continue to be profiting in the death of these people. It is wrong. They cannot continue to be complicit in dividing environment in a way that people are no longer comfortable with the activity of the multinational company. So our first line of action is that we're calling our government, we're calling on the political elite from the region, how NDDC has been paralyzed. Billions of naira that has gone to NDDC. You see how the elite in the region have stolen the money that is supposed to be building roads, money that is supposed to be building schools. They have stolen all this, and this is very unfortunate. So the question is that the government is complicit. We have anti-corruption institutions in the country, EFCC, we have ICPC. The only reason why this happened is that the political will to hold these government people accountable is not there. And then what do you expect from us? We have to look for a more creative and innovative way to continue to hold this company accountable.
Okay. Reverend Gordon, thank you very much. I'm very conversant with some of the engagements with the Church of England and then the Norges Bank of Norway, whom you describe as major investors, some of these multinational oil companies. We've seen multinational oil companies divesting their interest in the region in recent times. Is this not tantamount to job losses in the region? And in any case, even if we have local players taking over these investments, will the story be different for what it has always been in terms of affecting the lives of the ordinary people in the region?
I mean, if you as a human being involved in something for 60 years and it doesn't profit you and you have only 10 years or 20 years to go, won't you take a decision to make a change? John, and I will tell you now that for over 6 decades oil exploration has happened. What is the source of the livelihood of the people has been completely damaged. The environment is no longer good for farming. The river that the people depend on fishing has completely been polluted. So what options? The people is like, and when you talk about job, the oil industry is such a technical industry that employment is not as, most of the things are driven by technology. So it doesn't really give much job. So when you do cost benefit analysis, the land is what provides food for the people.
Okay, another glitch there with Reverend David Ogolo, but we hope we can re-establish connection with you so we can conclude this conversation.
I'm hearing you very well.
Yeah, yes,
I'm
go ahead.
You very well.
Yes, go ahead, Reverend Ogolo.
So,
yeah. Please go ahead, Reverend. Yeah, go ahead. Well, instability in the network is really derailing this conversation, which has been awesome so far. It's quite unfortunate, a bit of a technical hitch there coming from the network. We can't really sustain that conversation with Reverend David Ogolo. But I want to say big thanks to Reverend David Ogolo, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Issues, always on point when it comes to issues that relates to the Niger Delta.